Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today, and I've been going through Q&A questions, and this will be the last video I make before my part 2 Q&A video, so if you have any questions, post them in the comments section. But the question I have had asked the most probably, is why was Gobekli Tepe buried? And here you get a look at this site that's at least 12,000 years old that has really rewritten history. And, who actually built this and when did this actually start? This seemed to be a place of pilgrimage, a place of knowledge, a place of preserving knowledge. But the big mystery of this place is why was it buried in 8000 BC? These people seem to have gone through a very, very turbulent time. We have this pillar number 43 at Gobekli Tepe that seems to indicate a comet impact. And there have been a few different storylines about this pillar, but they all go the same direction. A comet impact happened, and this would have been at the forefront of these people's minds. This was a very cataclysmic time period, around 10 to 13,000 years ago. But why did they bury it 8,000 years ago? Well, I'm going to put out a theory today based on the evidence, and this is a subject I have been looking at for 3, 4, maybe even longer. Many of you are familiar with Randall Carlson and his work, and you kind of became familiar with him over the last 2 or 3 years. I made a video back in, I think it was 2012, where I proposed an impact into the North American ice sheet. So this is something I have been looking into for a long time. And one of the things that really has hit me in my research is how cataclysmic the Earth's history was back 7, 8, 9, 10,000, 12,000 years ago. And the only reason that we have what we have today is because it's been a relatively stable time period as far as nothing really, really bad happening. And that's the only reason why we have the modern progress we have today. Now, more and more evidence has come out that we had some really bad impacts. Maybe 13,000 and then 11,600 years ago. But Gobekli Tepe was buried 8,000 years ago, or 8,000 BC, 10,000 years ago. But I think we have another round of impacts, and something that came in the late 7,000 BCs that was truly devastating to Earth, and it may have killed at least half the people on the planet. Now, I have looked at a lot of scientific papers and study of impact events, and it seems definitely something happened in the late 7,000 BCs. And this is just one of the people who have brought forth this evidence, and this is Christopher Knight and Robert Lomas's book, Ariel's Machine. But it says here that they found evidence that the Earth was hit by 7 major cometary fragments circa 7640 BC. When you go back that far, there's a window of at least a couple centuries on either side. It says, this was initially revealed by the studies of tektites, small glassy objects found scattered in S-shaped patterns over large parts of the Earth's surface. Irregular shaped rocks, tektites, are formed by molten rock being ejected into the atmosphere and then freezing into flattened and rounded spheres. Scientists now recognize that there are remnants of high-energy cometary impacts and that such rocks tend to be very old. In 1970, tektites were found embedded in fossilized wood in Australia, and also I've read in Vietnam and a few other places that date to this late 7000 BC time period. And here is the map of where these fragments hit, and there was one impact between Australia and New Zealand, the Tasman Sea, I think that is the name of it, also the South China Sea, the Indian Ocean, just off the Azores, off of Central America, and down in Argentina. And also there was they say, an impact in Argentina on land from a small fragment, exactly in this late 7,000 time period, roughly between 7,700 BC and 8,000 BC. Something really bad happened here at this time period. And this website, I will leave the link below, but it also goes over some of the same evidence, and that was confirmed by other people studying this time period. It says, scientific studies of the effects of rapidly moving large objects impacting the ocean surface have conclusively demonstrated that waves resulting from a massive cometary impact would attain vertical heights of 2 to 3 miles with forward speeds of 400 to 500 miles per hour and sustained force that would carry them 2 to 3,000 miles in every direction. And that is a pretty reasonable estimate, I think, of what an impact in the ocean would result in. I don't think we can even wrap our heads around it, but a tsunami 3 miles high, 2 miles high. There has been evidence on some of the higher elevations in the UK with sedimentary sea life and sea material way up in high elevations, evidence of massive tsunamis. And just off of Scotland here, maybe in the North Sea, one proposal was, but there was an impact in the late 7000 BCs, and there was a massive tsunami that hit Scotland. And there is a settlement here, a Neolithic settlement dating from 7000 BC. And where did they build their community? They built it on top of a 200-foot deep tsunami deposit that was relatively recent, confirming evidence that there was a massive impact in the North Atlantic around the UK that resulted in massive tsunamis. In this website it says, incidentally, a very strong acid layer in Greenland ice cores has dated to 7630 BC, not too far off in the radiocarbon content of tree rings, indicated a major event occurring around 7550 BC, the same year as postulated by the Tolmans in their book. And it goes over other evidence here, maybe an impact near Tierra del Fuego. And it says 76 BC Britain. Britain and Ireland were still connected to Europe. Suddenly England separated from Europe by flooding in this period by an emerging North Sea. 7600 BC Egypt. According to some climatologists, Egypt and the Sahara Desert were still forested and wet in this period, and elephants and giraffes roaming the area, as well as aquatic animals in large lakes. And it says that it was this period that the Sahara Desert changed from wet and rainy to desert. And here is that mention about Scotland, and it says what they say are the Castle Street ruins were built on top of a layer of white sea sand that was deposited by a massive tsunami. But it says here, archaic myths from many parts of Europe refer to this event by the mention of bright new stars which fell to earth as 7 flaming mountains, of how oceans rose up in vast waves and totally engulfed the lands, and how summer was driven away with cold darkness that lasted several years. But that seems to be one of the underlying myths of this time period. Hellish winters, unbelievable cold. And that would explain Derinkuyu, this mysterious underground city that only guesses are to when it was originally built. People say it was built because of invaders. Well, would they have spent years and years and years constructing something if they saw an invasion coming in? Or did they build this up over years and years and years, knowing that something truly catastrophic was coming, and they wouldn't be able to survive above ground? There are some features in here that are pretty remarkable, but this is a massive underground city that would have been home to as many as 20,000 people. We have no true answer for this. I think the people who were responsible for the pilgrimage and the knowledge, the preservation of knowledge at Gobekli Tepe, I think they are the best candidate for building this massive underground city. I think they buried Gobekli Tepe, and they built this just in order to survive. And going on here, it says, geology also gives irrefutable evidence that at 2 times in the recent past, around 7640 BC, there's a window there, and 3100 BC, there have been complete reversals of the Earth's magnetic field caused by an outside influence, most probably a comet. Estimates of the decimation of the global human population from this event range as high as 50 to 60%, because most people would have lived on the seashores, and massive tsunamis all over the world would have taken out a lot of the human population. And this period between 7500 BC in like 5000 BC. We just don't have a lot of human remains and a lot of things to go on. I think the human population was decimated by this event. The people who were responsible for Gobekli Tepe and this preservation of knowledge in this place of pilgrimage, since they depicted a cometary impact, probably in the past, I think they saw this one coming. And they weren't worried about this place being destroyed by the impact. The way it looks to me and what my intuition tells me, I think they were worried that there wasn't going to be anybody around to maintain this place, and they buried it. Now, do the Egyptians say anything about this time period? Way back, late 7000s? Well, actually they do. In this picture here, I just wanted to show you this, but I did a video, the fourth original structure at Giza, and this is it right here, and there is a causeway coming down, and this is all buried on Google Earth pictures. But what was under here? There seemed to be a pit down here, but here's a pic from a few years ago when they were excavating the ancient port. And I mentioned that pre-dynastic kings were mummified in here. They were taken down. The ancient text says put on a boat. They would sail in front of Anubis and be taken to their burial at Abydos. Is that a myth? Well, it seems to be a port right in front of the causeway of this structure where they were mummified in and put on a boat. I thought that pic was pretty interesting. I just wanted to throw that in there. But what do the Egyptians say about this time period? Anything? Late 7000 BCs. Well, let me read to you from the Abu Hormuz papyrus. And this seems to indicate an object entering the Earth's atmosphere. And this is what it says. It entered near the star Regulus. There was a great thunder, a rain of burning stones. When did this happen? In the first minute of Cancer, indicating this time period, followed by huge water or a great flood. Something devastated Egypt at this time period. They recorded it on a papyrus from the Coptic time period, but it was written off obviously much more ancient text. And that would explain this kind of lull in the period between the original builder gods, the sons of Horus, and then the Neolithic remnants coming in and the dynastic Egyptians starting. This would explain the lapse between these two periods. Even though kings were said to rule Egypt, there was obviously a lull in the building and the accomplishments of whoever was living here. And I did a video a few months ago and a few people did, about a meteorite possibly being stored in the Great Pyramid, possibly in a symbolic sarcophagus. And we have a story from the 4th Dynasty, Khufu, I believe it is, makes a trip down to the Sphinx. It was already existing, even though it was supposedly built by his son. And he goes down to the Sphinx to actually see what is described as a thunderbolt. And there has been compartments in the Sphinx. Were they actually storing a meteorite, reflecting this time period when their gods were wiped out by a cataclysmic event that they actually recorded? Was a meteorite actually stored down in the Sphinx? That is a great question. And meteorites were revered by later dynasties, of course. I think it's Tut's dagger is made of meteoric material. But since no standard line of why this place was buried has been put out there, there has been a few guesses. I thought I would look at all the evidence that I could find from this time period, put together the simplest story that makes the most sense. What's the number one thing we know about this very, very ancient civilization that we have lost track of, that gave birth to the Egyptians and the Mayans and the Sumerians and other people? What's the number one thing we know? Their intricate knowledge of the heavens. Their religions was the skies, the stars, what was happening above them. I'm sure they saw it coming. And what is encoded to all these flood myths in a time when the Earth's population was devastated and there was just sole survivors? People had forewarning. They saw it coming, and they made preparations. They seem to depict a comet a long time ago at Gobekli Tepe. This had to be at the forefront of people's minds a long time ago. They wanted to preserve knowledge. They saw something truly devastating coming. They were worried nobody was going to be around to take care of Gobekli Tepe, so they buried it. Hope you thought this was interesting, and you all have a very nice day.